Welcome to your new favorite bookish podcast, Fully Booked and Caffeinated. I'm Kelsey,
And I'm Heather.
and today we will be discussing Divergent by Veronica Roth. As usual, let's talk about our fuel for this discussion. Tell me about some caffeine, Heather.
I'm actually hydrating because my water intake has been horrible, but my coffee intake has been excelling. So I'm trying to even myself out here a little bit.
So you're taking the caffeinated part too literally most of the
Yeah.
time, and now you
Yeah.
need to balance it out.
Yeah, so I'm drinking peach mango body armor, my go-to body armor
Okay.
flavor.
That sounds refreshing.
And I saw the other day a strawberry and lemonade flavor, so I picked that one up and I'm excited to try that.
Yeah, that sounds really good.
Mm-hmm.
They are giving me summer vibes, though.
True, but I'm all about
Which,
fall right now.
speaking of, though, I did have a butter pecan latte this morning, and I was in the drive-through, and like the speaker was ready for me, and I was like, "What are you gonna say, Kelsey? Are you gonna say pumpkin? Are you gonna say butter pecan?" And I was like, "Hit me with that butter pecan,"
Dilemma.
and I did it, and it was a good choice. I'm happy with my
I
choice.
mean, butter pecan is now an all year round flavor, so I don't think you
Exactly.
can't you can't put it in a corner. It's not just summer. It is now full year round.
Exactly. I can have it whenever I want and not
Hmm.
feel like I'm not embracing fall.
I know. I do think that them bringing pumpkin back in August is a terrible choice.
It's too much.
It's too
It's too
much.
much.
It's too
It's too
much.
much. It's like,
September, yes. Early September, like after
yes,
Labor Day, the day after Labor Day, pumpkin should just be full season. But it's like coming out in like mid-August when we're just sweltering in the heat. Mm-mm.
yeah. Because when is the mint going to come out? When are we going to start seeing peppermint mocha? Too soon.
Prob
It's going to be
Probably in
November
October.
1st.
Probably October,
Yeah,
actually. Although I
you're
wouldn't.
probably right.
Well, Starbucks usually doesn't put out their holiday menu until November,
Mm-hmm.
which is my favorite. That's my favorite coffee time of year. I love Starbucks
Yeah,
holiday drinks.
I do enjoy their holiday drinks. I
Mm-hmm.
agree with that. Especially like walking around a Barnes and Noble
Mm-hmm.
with a Starbucks holiday drink. Oof,
It
that's the
hits
dream
different.
right there. It does. It does. So anyway, cheers.
Cheers.
Okay, so Veronica Roth. I didn't know anything about her until looking her up for this book. And the crazy part is that there's not much about her past jobs or anything like that because she went to college for creative writing and then immediately began writing and became ridiculously successful. Like her career is a dream come true.
If only.
Yeah. So here's the really cool piece of info that I was like super surprised by. Roth wrote Divergent while she was on winter break in her senior year at Northwestern University. So she's still in college.
That's
She found
wild.
an agent by March, and the publishing rights were sold before she even graduated from college in 2010. The film rights were sold in March 2011 before the novel was even printed in April 2011.
That's insane.
I'm sorry, what? The book didn't even come out and they sold the film rights.
Also, I'm so jealous of her right now.
I know. Isn't that
That's the
absolutely
literal
bananas?
dream.
And I was reading this whole thing about how young adult novels like this one and like Hunger Games and stuff weren't really translating well to film, and Divergent did really well, but they were surprised that it did. So I'm
Hmm.
surprised that they sold the rights that quickly. I mean,
Yeah,
they
me
didn't
too.
make the movie. The movie didn't come out until 3 years after,
Hmm.
but still, like that's kind of crazy that they bought the rights
Yeah.
that quickly. Anyway, now she's just still writing and she lives in Chicago with her husband and her very cute dog. But anyway, about her writing. So she has the Divergent series, and then she also has the Carve the Mark series. Both are sci-fi, YA, fantasy fiction series, as are most of her books. And she's only written one adult fiction novel. Now, I haven't read Carve the Mark. Have you?
This is the only series of hers that or no, only books of hers that I've ever read.
Okay. Yeah, her newest one that's actually out, not the she has one coming out early next year. It's like a novella, but the one that came out recently actually looks really good. So maybe I'll give that a try. We'll see how this conversation goes. Anyways, so here's a question that Veronica Roth answered on Goodreads. So someone was able to ask her, "How do you create a strong, unforgettable female lead?" And she said, it sounds like a bit of a paradox, maybe, but you have to let your characters be weak and flawed in order to make them strong, or complex and memorable, which I think is more important and probably just a different way of saying it. The flaws you give them can't just exist to make the character more colorful. They have to create real, significant obstacles in the story. I think letting go of concerns about likability is important too. Not that you can't have a likable character, but I think sometimes we misunderstand what makes characters lovable, which is when they feel like real people. And real people have weak moments, dark moments, sad moments. Real people are vulnerable and relatable.
That's pretty on point.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And
Me
we
too.
talk about that, I feel like, in a lot of discussions about our favorite characters
Mm-hmm.
or characters that we say are well written, it is because they have depth and they have weak moments and dark moments and they have all of the facets of a real human being. Like
Yeah,
they're not just
it's more
likable.
than surface level.
Exactly. So I thought that was really cool. So, like I said, this is her first book. It's YA dystopian fantasy fiction novel, originally published in 2011. It was made into a movie in 2014, which we will discuss later on in the episode. It won 2 Goodreads Awards the year it came out, Favorite Book of 2011, and Best Young Adult Fantasy and Science Fiction in 2011.
I didn't even realize that Goodreads existed in 2011.
Oh, right. I didn't realize that Goodreads existed before I started using it,
I
to be
know.
honest.
Like, I literally only just started using it last year because of Bookstagram. And I'm like, oh, this is like a thing that's been around for a while.
They're out here giving out awards, and we thought that we like invented Goodreads just by using it. Oh well. I mean, Divergent knew. Veronica Roth knew. That's
I
for
know.
fucking sure.
Veronica Roth is like a prodigy, like having her first book be so successful. That's crazy. I'm still flabbergasted that she was in college when she wrote this book and it basically changed her life.
Yeah. And like she could have just stopped there. Like that's how
Hmm.
successful she was with it. And she's like 35. I was surprised that she's so young. And I don't know if it's because I was just like automatically comparing her to Suzanne Collins because like
Yeah,
Hunger Games, Divergent, I like associate those in my
that's a good
mind.
point.
So I was just so surprised at how young she was and how like immediately successful, which is fucking awesome. I mean,
Yeah, it is.
good for her. That's like we
Mm-hmm.
said, that's the dream.
Yeah.
All right, so let's get to the Goodreads, which was just invented when we started using it, summary. In Beatrice Pryor's dystopian Chicago world, society is divided into 5 factions, each dedicated to the cultivation of a particular virtue. Candor, the honest; abnegation, the selfless; dauntless, the brave; amity, the peaceful; and erudite, the intelligent. On an appointed day of every year, all 16-year-olds must select the faction to which they will devote the rest of their lives. For Beatrice, the decision is between staying with her family and being who she really is. She can't have both. So she makes a choice that surprises everyone, including herself. During the highly competitive initiation that follows, Beatrice renames herself Triss and struggles alongside her fellow initiates to live out the choice they have made. Together, they must undergo extreme physical tests of endurance and intense psychological simulations, some with devastating consequences. As initiation transforms them all, Triss must determine who her friends really are and where exactly a romance with a sometimes fascinating, sometimes exasperating boy fits into the life she's chosen. But Triss also has a secret, one she's kept hidden from everyone because she's been warned it can mean death. And as she discovers unrest and growing conflict that threaten to unravel her seemingly perfect society, she also learns that her secret might help her save those she loves, or it might destroy her. So that's the entire book.
No. But
It's
wait,
the
the
entire book. That's
part
actually
about
my
four
outline.
got me. Ooh, romance.
Sometimes exasperating boy. I mean, facts.
I know, it's true.
But that's my entire outline of the book.
Listen,
So
yeah. I don't
we
even
could
blame you. We
just
can just
we could
jump right
just
into
skip it.
it. I know.
That's
I know.
wow.
Literally.
It's the whole thing. Um, Surprising that they were able to put the entire book, this like 500-page book, into this 2-paragraph summary. But somehow the book really was 500 pages. It
It
really did
was.
happen.
It was.
So we're in a dystopian society where basically war broke out and this community was built in what used to be Chicago, and they've developed the faction system in order to govern the people. So they're trying to have people fit into their factions, which center around positive human qualities. And if they exhibit those qualities fully, then they'll weed out the impulsiveness or the depravity of human nature,
Hmm.
which, like, immediately, this is not going to work. But okay, we're going with it.
Do any
We're going with
dystopian
it.
books work though? I mean, let's be real.
True, true. But like, if you just try to be as kind as possible, then you'll just never not be kind.
Hmm.
I don't know. Seems
Yeah.
ridiculous. So at age 16, why do all of these books, it happens at 16? It's too
No.
young. You should
I
be
know.
having an extravagant party with a poofy dress,
It's
you
like
know.
that's like a quinceanera, isn't it? Oh no, I guess Sweet
No,
16s do
it's a
get
sweet
fancy.
16.
No, they get fancy too. I don't even remember what I did for my. Oh, my Sweet 16 was a luau in my backyard
Well, that's fun.
because I was a summer birthday, and also I came from a very not rich family.
My family wasn't rich, but
No,
we
but
did make a very big deal about Sweet 16s.
yeah.
Mine was Hollywood themed.
Oh my god,
We had a red carpet.
that's fantastic.
Yeah, it was pretty great. The 16 candles where you have to like choose 16 people in your life who
I
mean
know.
something.
Yeah.
It's a lot of pressure. I wrote
Yeah.
those speeches weeks in advance. Anyway, so I had other things on my mind when I was 16. This is a little different. So they have to choose the faction that they're going to stay in for the rest of their life. And they take the aptitude test to determine which faction they would fit into best. And usually it's the faction they were born into, but not always, which is kind of crazy.
I think it was what was a concept to me that I didn't quite understand was the fact that so they take the aptitude test and then they tell you what faction you I guess technically should belong to. And you
Hmm.
have and I can understand if you have the option to just stay in the faction you were born into or going to the faction that the test says you should do. But then you can also just choose any faction you want realistically. And I'm like, then what's the point of the aptitude test?
Or what is the point of choosing? Like, the whole point in this society is that you're supposed to choose the one that you will fit into best in order to keep the society running.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in the movie, they have the interaction with Janine explain it, where Beatrice is like, well, you don't really want us to choose. Like, we're supposed to go with what the test says. And Janine's like, no, you're supposed to see what's really in your heart. Like, they don't really say that in the book, and they don't really mean it
Mm-mm.
either.
No,
You
they
know?
don't.
So that part, I agree. There's like too many factors that go into the decision. You should
Mm-hmm.
either pick your aptitude test result or pick where you were born into.
That's what I would.
Those should be the
Yeah,
only
I think
options.
those should be the options. I mean, obviously, unless you're like Divergent, you have multiple choices, but you can't tell anybody that. But
Exactly.
you know, it's weird that you could realistically choose which one you want to go to, and it has nothing to do with you or your aptitude results.
Yeah, you're just like, fuck it, nah, I want to wear black and have tattoos. I mean, same. But
Literally you.
anyway, so literally me. So there's the 5 different factions, which they talked about briefly in the summary, but it's this whole idea of faction before blood. So once you make that decision, if you decide to defect and go to a different faction, you're no longer a part of your family. You can no longer interact with them. You can't go back to them. Like, you're completely severing ties. And then your allegiance is to your faction, not to your family anymore. Which, like, your family who raised you for 16 years, but okay.
I know it's ruthless,
Fucked up concept. Oh, yes,
ruthless.
yes,
Yeah,
ruthless.
but also yes, fucked up concept.
But yeah, it is ruthless. It's like they can't even go and visit each other
Yeah.
because it's seen as betraying their
Mm-hmm.
faction. When it's literally just like, I lived with you for 16 years and I just want to say hi, or I'm sorry for leaving, or explain my decision, or anything. But it's just, I mean, when this story is taking place, we're at the point where the faction system is starting to crumble, obviously.
Yeah.
So maybe it wasn't always like that, but now it's like any little thing that happens can be seen as an act of rebelliousness.
Mm-hmm.
So real quickly, the factions. Abnegation, we know, is selfless. They have no self-indulgence whatsoever, no vanity. They eat plain food, they dress plain, they spend their entire lives serving others. Candor is known for their honesty. To them, truth is black and white, there's no in between. The erudite are all about knowledge, so they have the constant pursuit of knowledge and learning. Amity is about kindness and harmony. They do the farming and they're just seen as the most peaceful people. There's never any conflict with the Amity. And
Also,
then the
Amity
Dauntless.
just did not show up at all in this book.
Okay, I was so surprised about that
But I know
because,
it has a big premise in the second book, I remember.
yes,
But I
yes.
was, because all the other factions are talked about at length for a good part of the
Hmm.
book, and I'm like, where's Amity? Is it just because I'm sure that everyone who's in Amity probably just stays in Amity because I think you kind of have to if that's where you're from. But I was kind of surprised that it just had barely any introduction or any. It was barely discussed.
I completely agree. I think that the intro of the movie where she explains Amity is more than we get from the entire book.
I agree.
And I
Anyways,
was like surprised about it because, like you said, it does show up so much in the second book. So I was like,
yeah,
oh, I forgot that it's irrelevant
yeah. Anyways,
for now.
continue. Dauntless.
So, okay. So, Dauntless, they're all about courage. So, they guard the fence, they police the factions, they're daring, self sufficient, and proud. And then obviously we have the factionless. They live in poverty on the outskirts of society. They're people who have been kicked out of their factions for various reasons, or weren't accepted into their factions, or have chosen to leave. It's kind of unclear. I mean, we know that during the initiation, people who don't make it past the initiation are then factionless, but there's obviously other reasons that people are factionless also, and they don't really get into it in this book
Mm-mm,
yet.
not yet.
All right, so age 16, Beatrice, our main character, doesn't fit into her faction. She's too curious, and selflessness just doesn't come naturally to her. During the test, the aptitude test, her results are inconclusive and she finds out that she's divergent, but she should never share that info ever. But they don't give her any background. They're just like, you are divergent. Don't you dare tell anybody or else.
Shut your mouth.
And she's like, what does that mean? And like, shh, nope,
Mm-mm,
nope,
nope.
no questions.
Nope.
So, divergent basically means that you don't fully fit into one of the five factions. And this is a threat to the society because divergent doesn't conform.
Mm-hmm.
So, the reason that the results were inconclusive is because it didn't show a clear faction as the result. There were multiple factions that Beatrice could have fit into, which is a big no no. So, Caleb, Beatrice's brother, who has made being selfless look so easy for their entire lives. Like Beatrice looks up to him and how easy he makes abnegation look. And he kind of not judges her, but he's kind of like always disappointed in her that
Yeah.
she's not, it doesn't come naturally for her. So it's the biggest shock when on choosing day, he chooses erudite.
Mm-hmm.
And Beatrice is like, excuse me, what now? And then she goes up and chooses Dauntless.
So both children are just like, see you later.
And the parents are like,
Cool, cool,
what?
cool. Cool, cool, cool.
Shocked. So in the society, abnegation is in charge of the government because they're selfless. So basically, they would never do something to benefit themselves because they
Yeah.
only think about other people, which, like, okay, this is sound reasoning, I suppose. But the other factions are starting to resent that, so they've been attacking the character of the leaders of abnegation. So Marcus is the main leader, but Beatrice and Caleb's dad is also a leader. So when they both choose to defect, this further fuels the rumors about the leader's character and how they aren't who they say they are, etc., etc.
Mm-hmm.
So already tensions are brewing.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
So Beatrice takes off on her journey to Dauntless. She's got to jump onto a moving train and then jump off of a moving train 7 feet, 7 feet? Seven
So,
stories off the ground.
yeah. It's like
And
7
like
feet's not a
several
lot.
feet. Yeah, that's not a lot. I mean, I don't know if I could jump 7 feet, but people can. Um, they have to jump 7 stories across a gap onto a roof
So
off a moving train.
it was funny when Eric and I were watching the movie because he was like, "Does the train ever stop?" And I actually had to think about it and like think back into the book, and I was like, "No, I don't think it ever stops." There's
I don't
never
think it ever stops.
every time that the train takes place in this book, people are jumping off of it or jumping onto it. There's never a
Yes.
oh
It does slow.
okay,
They
but
do mention
doesn't
that it
yeah
slows when it gets to, not when it's by the rooftop, but when it gets to like the city center or something, it
okay.
slows down. And then I guess at the end, which is the Amity Farms, I guess it turns around. Does it stop to turn around? I don't know that much about how trains work,
So
so.
actually this train is kind of a loophole. It's
And
just
also, this train is a drain on the resources. I
I
mean,
know. I
let it
know.
take a break.
I know.
So, anyway, Beatrice makes her first friend, Christina, who becomes a big part of the story, and she immediately makes a name for herself, metaphorically and literally. She
Mm.
volunteers to be the first jumper from the roof into this giant, dark, unknown pit, and then she renames herself to Triss. Also, this is where we meet Four, who will be her instructor, and the boy, the boy that we giggled about. Okay, so
Exasperating boy.
exasperating is like an understatement. So they find out that they have to compete to pass their initiation, and not everyone will make the cut, which is a big shock that basically just because they chose Dauntless, it guarantees them nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Now Dauntless has to choose them.
Yeah.
And that's part of where we said, like, if they don't make the cut, then they're automatically factionless. Like, you can't go back to your faction, you can't go back to your family. There's no going back. So the testing is in three stages in the book: physical, emotional, and mental, which four says, we believe that preparation eradicates cowardice, which we define as the failure to act in the midst of fear. So fear is this huge thing for the Dauntless because they're so brave and they're so courageous, but really it's just about overcoming their fears.
Mm-hmm.
So we start to see a little change in Triss as she embraces her intellect, she embraces her violent side a little bit. At first, she's horrible at hand-to-hand combat because she's the smallest,
Which
she's the
yeah, it's not
weakest.
a shocker. She comes from this community that is plain. She's not gonna know how to
hmm
do anything.
Like they eat the bare minimum.
Yeah.
It's not like she's out there lifting weights. She's not running. I don't know how she was running with them to jump on this train. Like, this is the most you've run in your whole life, I bet.
I know.
And they just kind of throw them in there. Like,
Mm-hmm.
they're like, by the way, you're going to be fighting someone to the death today.
Someone who's much larger than you.
Yeah. And so there's new rules. We meet Eric, the other. He's not really an instructor. He's just one of the Dauntless leaders who's always there
He's
to
like a
like,
dictator. He's just
yeah, he just like pops in to be like, oh, whatever Four said, we're not doing that.
I know.
And so there's this huge rivalry between Four and Eric. And basically, the rules have changed for the initiation. It used to be that when they're fighting, someone can
Tap out.
concede.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And then they'll lose the fight. But Eric says, no, no. Now we fight until one of you cannot continue because a dauntless never quits. So it's like kind of this early on, you're seeing that Four and Eric have very different ideas about what Dauntless is.
Yeah.
So Triss is determined to find it within herself to become Dauntless, mostly because she doesn't want to be factionless, but also because this is the choice that she made and
Mm-hmm.
she needs to go with this choice. So we said she embraces her violent side a little bit. There's the fight with Molly where Four has to literally pull her away because she just keeps attacking.
Mm-hmm.
And it starts to worry her because she says she traded cowardice for cruelty and weakness for ferocity.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of slightly shifting her ideals, she's kind of like flipped a coin, basically.
Yeah, I also can't blame that character development though, because she's made fun of a lot. She's not really respected. She's not taken seriously. So I can understand why. And then, there's all the judgment because she like left her faction and her dad's a
Hmm.
leader and stuff like that. So I can understand why she kind of became as ferocious as she did because everyone
Can we
doubted
talk
her.
about the nickname Stiff? Like,
Yeah.
that's the best we could come up with. And the fact that the instructor also uses this, it's meant to be like a derogatory term for abnegation,
Mm-hmm.
like, also uses it. It's just very weird. But yeah, I agree with you. I do also like, though, how they really keep revisiting the fact that abnegation is so deep within her,
Yeah.
and even though she never felt like she belonged in abnegation, that she fully belonged, those things that she was taught for 16 years of her life are so deeply ingrained and hard to unlearn. So she naturally wants to stick up for people when they're being bullied. Four says to her, because you're from abnegation, it's when you're acting selflessly that you're at your bravest. So, example, when she stands up for Al, when
Mm-hmm.
Eric wants him to stand in front of the targets and have literal knives thrown at him, and she does it instead. And she would have never seen herself as brave. Like, she doesn't see that as brave. She sees it as sticking up for someone else.
Yeah, and I feel like she every time she goes to do something, it's almost like she considers like what would my family do? Like what would my mom
Hmm.
do? What would Caleb do? What would my dad do? So she is very much still not stuck in abnegation ways, but she still very much takes those qualities and submerges it with the Dauntless. Her
Hmm.
Dauntless like personality.
And I think that that is such a huge flaw with the faction system, is that
Mm-hmm.
when you live only within your faction, you associate only within your faction. Like, until she was 16, she never even talked to someone from another
No.
faction except in school, but only in certain classes where they put together. You know what
Yeah,
I
and she
mean?
like knows nothing about affection. Like when she sees Christina and Will being like flirty, she's like it like throws her off.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's like, how are they expected to so quickly unlearn everything that they've been taught for
Mm-hmm.
16 years and relearn something new? And that's why it's so rare for someone to move to a different faction.
Yeah.
So it makes sense. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
it's also like picking the easy choice. Like, she knew that abnegation would be not the easy choice because it wasn't easy for
Mm-mm.
her to be
No.
selfless, but it would have been the easiest choice,
Agreed.
if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so we talked about it a little bit, but we also come to find out that the faction system, like every social system, has evolved and not necessarily for the better. So the Dauntless Manifesto says, we believe in ordinary acts of bravery, in the courage that drives one person to stand up for another. And now the leaders, Eric especially, are focused on violence and a very different definition of what bravery means. So before, her standing up for Al or standing up for someone else would have been seen as brave, and now it's seen as rebelliousness.
Yeah.
And we also, they really focus on dauntless, erudite, and abnegation. So, erudite is targeting abnegation through all of these rumors that they're spreading. And they say that they've also changed. They also used to pursue knowledge for the sake of doing good, but now they pursue knowledge and ingenuity with greedy hearts.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so Triss narrowly makes it past the first round, the physical round, and the second and third round are kind of the same thing. Like, they kind of run into each other. The second round is really just like prepping you for the third round. They're emotional and mental evaluations where they have to be in simulations surrounding their fears. So it's all about controlling their fears or controlling themselves in the face of fear. So four says, becoming fearless isn't the point. That's impossible. It's learning how to control your fear and how to be free from it. That's the point.
Mm-hmm.
And Triss's response is basically that she always saw the Dauntless as fearless. But like we said, in actuality, it's really what she was seeing was fear under control,
Yeah.
which is like another part. She didn't know this background about Dauntless. She just saw them as these like badasses who weren't scared of anything, but really they've done this mental preparation to become that way.
Yeah.
Which also, that's wild that you didn't realize that they did all this mental preparation and you still chose to join them and just thought you were going to be fearless all of a sudden.
I
Okay,
know. I
it's
know. It's
weird.
like it's interesting because I feel like these they don't know realistically what they're getting themselves into. They just see the faction for what it is without really knowing what it is.
Yeah, like the surface level,
Mm-hmm.
what they've been told
Yeah,
by
exactly.
school or their
Mm-hmm.
families. So as the story continues, the stakes get higher and higher as Triss gets better at fighting and she excels way more than others at the mental simulations. The others are threatened and they try to potentially kill her. It's unclear what the ultimate motive was,
Oh my
but it
God,
wasn't
I
great.
know.
So, do you think when Peter, Drew, and Al, who's supposed to be her friend, when they hang her over the chasm, do you think they're trying to scare her or kill her?
They're trying to kill her because
I agree.
even if they're trying to scare her, that's not really going to accomplish anything. Because Peter stabbed, what was it, Edward, I think his name was, like, in the eyeball, and then he ended up having to, like,
Yeah.
leave. So Peter's threatened because he wants to be number one, and he wasn't number one with Edward, and now Triss surpassed him in
Mm-hmm.
in the next level because she's so good at the simulations. So
Mm-hmm.
he's just basically, and especially the fact that it's a stiff that's passing him. It's a girl,
Mm-hmm.
so his masculinity is threatened.
Oh, his masculinity is fragile.
Mm-hmm.
Ugh.
So he's just like, well, let's just get rid of her. No one will know.
Yeah.
And it's because even if it was just to scare her, I don't know, that's kind of extreme, but
And like you said, what would it help? Like, I don't think that it would convey that message of like, you better stop excelling because
it wouldn't.
then we'll kill
No,
you. Like
it's
it's not that spelled out, but I do think that Peter and Drew wanted to kill her. I think that Al convinced himself that they were
oh
just going to
yeah.
scare her.
Mm-hmm.
So then as she gets better at the mental simulations, now she's putting a target on her back to Dauntless leadership. So not only does she have to worry about the other initiates trying to kill her, if Dauntless leadership finds out that she's divergent, they'll have her killed. So
She's just
overall, not
she's just
safe.
she's just jumping hurdles left and right. She just can't catch a break. And again, this 16-year-old girl who has no idea what she's gotten herself into, and I mean, realistically, she's doing great at dealing
Hmm.
with it, but
Oh,
it's
100%.
it's always something.
And you see, I don't want to say the weakness, but you see how the strain is
Yes.
affecting other initiates, and it's
Mm-hmm.
just not affecting her that way.
No, and in fact, it's almost, well, not almost, it is. It's changing her, like we
Hmm.
touched on before.
Fueling her.
So now she's a different version of herself, and she's losing herself in that, which she recognizes a few different times in the book. So I think
Hmm.
that for her, it's more about persevering, and for whatever reason, she's just not as thrown off as other people are. For whatever reason,
Hmm.
I don't know what it is, but she's just not as she deals with it a lot better, because Al
Hmm.
would like cry every night and everything like that. So
I think it all speaks to that divergence part where it's like
it's
she's able
yeah,
to control her emotions, she's able to control herself and not let what other people are saying, doing, thinking control her.
yeah. hmm
So I never really thought about it, but I think that that's
No, that's a good point. I didn't even think about the divergence being the reason probably why she's so different than all the other initiates, because
hmm
she has a better like you said, a better control over her emotions
hmm
because she's more than one thing.
exactly, which is why she obviously excels in the simulations. The fighting is a lot more, it's a lot harder to use your mind to get out of, if you
Yeah.
know what I mean.
hmm
And she does end up doing that. That's how she ends up getting better at fighting. She uses her speed, she
hmm
watches for their tells, stuff like that. But basically, she went from being scared to disappoint her family and become factionless to now being scared for her life every day.
Yeah, more or less.
16. 16. Okay. So obviously, like we said, Triss has to hide her divergence in these simulations, and Four starts working closely with her to help her without spelling it out. He's also a dick about it. From Triss's POV, she says, I fear his shifting moods. They show me something unstable inside of him, and instability is dangerous. So she kind of tries to dig for info and see if he is also divergent, but he'll never answer her roundabout questions. And he just says, I keep trying to help you, but you refuse to be helped. So Triss's stubbornness combined with Four's stubbornness is why we will pause here and discuss this relationship dynamic. I would love to know your thoughts, Heather. What do you think about this budding relationship?
It's like it was weird because initially like Four is a total dick to her throughout the entire novel. And then like a light switch goes off and he's just like sweet and caring with her. And then he's basically says to her, "You should have known that me being a dick was protecting you, and I was trying to convey these things to you." But she was seeing the exact opposite. And here's my thing. And I say this every time we talk about a book that has to do with a couple. Fucking communication needs to be better. It needs to be better.
Use your words. Use your words. And I'm now thinking about it as like the reason that he was so, I want to say immature in this. Like that whole like, you should have known that me being a dick was
Yeah.
like, I'm teasing you on the playground. That means I like you. But then we find out that she thinks that he's like this big ladies' man when really he's never been intimate with
I
anyone. He's
know.
never liked anyone. He's
There's
never kissed anyone. And
yeah.
then when we find out that he came from abnegation, then you know that he wasn't comfortable with physical contact. He wasn't comfortable with expressing himself. So it does start to make more sense. But he is an asshole.
Yeah, he really is. I forgot about that when I was reading the book. Realistically, I didn't remember that
Hmm.
being a thing. I remembered him trying to protect her, but I didn't remember him like being such a dick to her and like her almost wanting to kind of figure him out. And I didn't understand why she even wanted to do that either. Like, I don't know. It
Yeah.
was the dynamic between them really, it wasn't written as well as I remember.
Hmm.
And I actually kind of wish it was written better, but again, now I know it's the first book. Also, it's a YA novel, so I'm
Hmm.
reading it now. Being older, I see like kind of the potholes in it a little bit.
Yeah.
But
I agree. I remember this as I loved their love story.
me too.
And then I reread it and I was like, ugh, no. Like,
Also, like what
yes,
love story? Because again, when they do eventually get together, there's not really any. There's no build up. There's
they just like
no. They're just
make
like
out.
they're just like, oh, we're together now, and it's like, okay, but why? Like, what happened in your relationship to bring you to this? Because you being a dick to each other isn't enough. Because then one
I
day
think
he's just like, oh, come into my simulation with me, and it's like, but why?
that's the thing. Okay, that's the thing. So I think that they see it as they both revealed their deepest, darkest secret. His deepest, darkest secret is that he came from abnegation and Marcus is his dad.
Yeah,
Her deepest, darkest secret is that she's divergent. So they skip the whole rest of it, the whole rest of getting to know someone, building a relationship, and they're just like, oh, but we know the deepest, darkest thing. So now we have to be together.
yeah,
And like, yes, he saved her from being dropped into a chasm to certain death. I appreciate that. He helped her pass her initiation. Appreciate it. But as far as love,
yeah.
I don't think so. I
No,
don't
and
I think this is toxic.
I think that, and again, I haven't read these books in so long, so I'm hoping that when I read the next two, it kind of brings me back to like why I loved it so much,
Yeah.
why I loved
Yeah.
them so much, because I definitely did. I definitely loved them together. So I'm thinking that it builds in the other books, and it's like, oh, okay, like it comes full circle. Hopefully, I can't
Yeah,
remember.
because like you said, he does end up being really sweet and like taking care of her and saying all the right things. And it's like this guy is has got some bipolar love. I mean,
hmm
it's frightening.
Yeah.
Like she said, it's a little scary, the instability. So anyway, like we touched on a little bit, but Four takes Triss into his fear landscape. We find out that Four was named Four because he has only four fears, which is the least that have ever existed. One being his father Marcus, who is from abnegation. So Triss discovers that he defected from abnegation and that the allegations that Marcus is abusive were true.
hmm
Now, I have another issue. This part irks me because it seems like it's not that much of a secret. Like, he's 18, so it was only 2 years ago that he defected. Why didn't she recognize him? Why does no one at Dauntless say anything, even in passing? When she's excelling as a stiff from abnegation, no one is like, LOL, so did Four, that's so crazy.
I can agree with that, and it's also weird that it's brought up in the book that whenever Marcus would come over to the Priors for like dinner, Tobias just never came.
Hmm.
And it's like, so she's like, just what? You just don't know what he looks like? But didn't you guys all go to fucking school together? Like, how do you
You
not
didn't
know?
walk to school together. You
Or
didn't
just not
like.
even that. Like, you still know people, I would assume. I don't understand how the schooling works then. Are you saying that you guys are just separated all the time? Because that doesn't make any sense.
Unless it was separated with girls and boys. But I feel like at some
No,
point they said that it wasn't.
no, because then they all can, like, go on the same transportation together.
Yeah.
So,
I don't know. And it was literally 2 years
and
ago because they say
also,
that he's 18.
yeah, and they also, all the factions when they're in school were mixed together. It wasn't like they only
Exactly.
did classes with abnegation students. It was all together. So,
There's no way that this is a thing. And I never realized this until rereading it. And I'm like, there's no way that no one is talking about the fact that Four was number one in his class and came from abnegation. And like, oh my God, Tris, you're doing so well. That's wild. So did Four.
I know.
Yeah, I don't know if he did like some Men in Black shit where he like erased everyone's memories so they wouldn't remember where he came from, but
Could be.
it seems like something that might happen in this book. So anyway, now in the book, I felt like her fear landscape, she didn't hide her divergence that well. Like in the movie, which we'll talk about, she has to actively choose how a Dauntless would get out of the fearscape. So instead of just saying like, "Oh no, this is a simulation, we could just get out of it." She has to think, "No, a Dauntless would
Yeah.
plug up the hole where the water's coming through, blah, blah, blah." But in the book, there's the part where she just decides that the water tank is like made of ice, so it will crack. And then she's burning at the stake and she just says it smells like rain and it starts raining. I'm like, this feels like Divergent to me.
I know, and it's almost like I feel something else I noticed because then Four tells her like you need to kind of like control it better and think
Hmm.
more dauntless, and she just doesn't. She'll do the simulations
Yeah.
over and over again, and she's still doing the same thing. And I'm like, if you know you're being watched, wouldn't you try to like maybe be in your simulation longer, or your landscape longer than you need to be, or try to do something? Like she's just like,
Instead,
yeah,
she's slaying it,
I know.
which like is great because then she goes to the top of the rankings, but
It's also a target on her
they
back.
literally, exactly, they literally said to her, like, stay in the middle of the pack. You don't want to be the best and you don't want to be the
Mm-hmm.
worst. And
Yeah.
she's like, actually, I'm really fucking good at this. So,
Mm-hmm.
no.
Exactly.
So, Erudite develop a serum to turn Dauntless into mindless soldiers, and they're injected right after their initiation. All along, Triss has suspected that Four is Divergent because he's been kind of warning her all along that they're watching her. He keeps dropping hints, but she doesn't know for sure until this serum activates because everyone else is in this trance. And so she kind of plays along because she realizes that she's supposed to be in this trance. And then she finds Four and realizes that he's also immune to the serum. So he has
Mm-hmm.
to be Divergent, which, like, you could have told her sooner. I thought y'all were in a relationship, but okay. There's, like you said, no communication. It's fine.
No, and also I didn't quite understand where Triss's obsession with thinking Four was Divergent came from either. Like that kind of just popped up out of nowhere as well.
Yeah, because the other person who warned her about divergence was Tori,
Mm-hmm.
who administered her aptitude test and then told her, did she tell her in the book?
Yeah, and then like when she sees her mom at the
Yes,
when her mom comes to the choosing or the family day,
visiting day, yeah.
visiting day, and she says like, she's like, tell me really what happened with your results of the aptitude test, and
Hmm.
her mom is like, you can't tell anyone you're divergent. So it's like the only people that she spoke to about it won't tell her anything. But for whatever reason,
Yeah.
she just comes up with like, oh, I think Four's divergent. It's like, but why? But why do you think he's
I think it's
divergent?
literally because she's like, oh, I love him. He has to be divergent
I know,
with
like,
me.
there's really nothing that happens in the book that I can remember that she's immediately is like, ooh, divergent.
Because he just seems so dauntless.
Yeah.
And the other people who have told her about divergence, she doesn't know that they're divergent and Tori isn't divergent. But
Yeah.
like, it's not like everyone who mentions it to her is divergent.
Yeah, I mean, and
So,
I can get, like, her understanding, her starting to catch on because he does, during, like, the landscapes, he's kind of like, what was your aptitude result? or, you know, kind of asking prodding questions so I can understand why she would at that point be like, you know, bells and whistles should be going off. But then she's also just like being honest with him in a sense. And I'm like, you need to be smarter about this. Like, you can't just like what if like Four is like infiltrating and he's like pretending to be your friend when realistically he's part of the problem, but I mean he's not, obviously, but you don't know that.
I think this speaks to her 16-year-oldness because she's so smart in some aspects, and then in other aspects she's so trusting that like I'm reading this person right, so I know what to expect, when really it's like you have no fucking idea. Just because he didn't want to be in leadership doesn't mean that he doesn't have that same agenda.
Yeah, exactly.
So the serum activates, lots of shit happens. Triss and Four are found out pretty quickly. They don't hide it at all. Triss is shot, and Four is taken to be tested on by Janine. So obviously Triss has to save her family and Four. This is what it comes down to. This is it. So her mom saves her, then sacrifices her own life, but not before revealing that she used to be Dauntless and that she too is Divergent.
That was a cool plot twist. I did like that.
I loved that. And she explains it finally. Someone explains to Triss what divergence means. So she basically moved to abnegation to avoid detection because Dauntless is the most unsafe faction for a Divergent. So she says this to Triss about conformity. And most people do it. For most people, it's not hard to learn, to find a pattern of thought that works and stay that way. But our minds move in a dozen different directions. We can't be confined to one way of thinking, and that terrifies our leaders. It means we can't be controlled. And it means no matter what they do, we will always cause trouble for them. This is the explanation we needed a long time ago. But, I mean, it was more meaningful right before her mom died.
Yeah, exactly.
So then Triss, her brother, her dad, and Four's dad, we brought him along for some reason.
So random.
All set off to stop the simulation. They capture Peter, who the Dauntless leaders pulled out of the simulation because he doesn't need to be in a simulation in order to kill people. So that's nice.
He's basically a dick, so like, yeah, we could use that.
Yeah. They're like, this guy's ruthless as fuck. If we tell him to kill people, he'll do it.
Yeah.
So they capture Peter. Triss's dad also sacrifices himself. This abnegation shit runs deep.
And also, like, I remembered that her mom died. I didn't remember that dad died. And for some reason, I thought he was in the second book. And I was like, oh, wait, no, he's definitely not. Clearly, because he just died.
And it's like an hour later. Like, she loses both her parents within the span of, like, an hour.
The biggest douche of abnegation lives. And I'm like, Marcus, you know what I mean? Like, of all people, he should have been the one to die. But which
I kind of wish they included that in the movie, where he, like, jumped out of the moving train and, like, almost, he was, like, hanging on by the ledge and, like, almost fell down. She was like, damn it, he made it.
I know. She's like, I wouldn't be butthurt, like, if he just happened to die while we're doing this.
And then she just doesn't warn Four that he's there. But anyway,
I know.
So Triss finds Four. He's in a simulation in the Dauntless building, and he beats the hell out of her before she can break him out of the simulation. And she does it just by, she does it in the book. I can't remember how she does it in the book. She does it in the movie. Is it the same? She puts the
gun to her head.
That's the same in the book, right?
In the book, yeah, she puts the gun to her head. Well, because here's what I didn't like about this scene in the movie compared to the book, because in the book she turns the gun on herself, like she's gonna shoot herself, and it takes him out of it because he can't kill her. Right. And then, but like in the movie, she's like, she keeps saying, I love you, I love you, I love you. And I was like, no, I was like, he says it to her first in the book. And I loved how he did it in the book. That was one of my favorite scenes. And then in the movie, it's like, no, like, you took away my favorite part. And it was just kind of like, okay, you know. So I didn't love that. But yeah, no, she gets him to come out of it because she turns the gun on herself. And he was like, and he
I didn't know if I was just remembering the movie.
No, it was, but it was still different how she did it to herself in the movie than how she did it in the book. Because I think she has the gun, and instead of shooting him, she turns it on herself. Mm-hmm. Whereas in the the movie, I think he automatically puts the gun to her head, and then that's when she's like, I love you, I love you, I love you. So I think that's, and she's like, it's okay, like, it's okay, like she's saying, like, it's okay, you can kill me,
Yeah.
like, I know it's not you, but I love you. And so that, they were vastly different, but similar, if that makes sense.
Gotcha. No, I know what you mean.
Yeah.
And I completely agree about the I love you in the movie. Bruh, when she started saying I love you, I was like, stop it. Stop it.
This is
Stop
how
it.
it happens. It happens
This is
when
not the
everything is
time.
over and they're on the train together, and then he just says it in this cute way. He was like, you know, would you
I
be
don't want to
afraid?
scare you.
Yeah, but I think I don't want to scare you and say I love you. And he's like, you know, she's like, oh, you can. He's like, okay, because I do love you. You know what I mean? And I'm like, that was cute, and I appreciated that. But in the movie, I was like, oh, you ruined it.
Yeah, it was very weird in the movie. But I get it. So she breaks him out of the simulation. They stop the simulation. In the book, they stop it. The Dauntless soldiers are able to break out of it. And then Triss, For, Peter, Caleb, and Marcus escape. And the book ends with this quote: Abnegation and Dauntless are both broken, their members scattered. We are like the factionless now. I do not know what life will be like, separated from a faction. It feels disengaged, like a leaf divided from the tree that gives it sustenance. We are creatures of loss. We have left everything behind. I have no home, no path, and no certainty. I am no longer Triss, the selfless, or Triss the brave. I suppose that now I must become more than either. I like the ending.
Me too.
Like that part. So, before we get into a little more movie discussion, two-part question. Which faction would you want to be in, and which do you think you would actually fit into?
I kind of think that, I don't know, this is like it could go either way. I feel like I almost feel like I'd want to be in Amity only because of the positivity it is, and I know it's not really in this book, so I think it's why it's hard for me to say that, because I think that once I read more about it in the second book again, when we reread that one, I'll understand why I'm saying this, because I think that Amity is probably the one that I would fit in the most, but I think realistically I would belong in Erudite or Abnegation.
Okay. I agree with you on, I think that you would fit into Amity, but I also don't feel like I have a clear picture of it right now.
Yeah.
I would want to be an Amity. It seems the most chill.
I mean, you're right. I mean, yeah.
I wish I was that type of person, but realistically, I am not. I would be, I mean, looks-wise, I'm obviously Dauntless.
Yeah.
But I do have a problem with speaking the truth, so maybe I would be Candor.
So you could be, it's what I'm saying, like, I feel like I am selflessness with abnegation, but I also love knowledge, and I'm very intelligent, so I can see myself being in either, and I can see the same for you. You're obviously Dauntless. The time I'm reading this, I'm like, this is Kelsey. I'm like, Kelsey would be Dauntless. Kelsey would
like,
fuck
I
it up.
wouldn't want to fight. I'm like, I don't want to.
It looks like I'll beat you up, but I don't want to.
Yeah, no, I'm good, thanks. I know I have more tattoos than all of you, but I'm good.
She's really sweet inside, bye.
I think it's like a Hogwarts house thing.
Yeah.
Like where you're definitely like a hybrid of two houses.
And I think that that's normal.
I think we're divergent is what you're telling me.
We are divergent, yeah.
Which, I know that we skipped over this, but I do love the part about For's tattoo.
Yeah.
Where they reveal the tattoo on his back that has every single faction symbol. It has Abnegation and Dauntless the biggest, but has every single faction, and he explains that he doesn't want to be just one thing. He wants to be kind and brave and selfless and smart.
But I hated his back tattoo in the movie. The big black lines.
Yeah. I liked the part that came up on his neck.
And the tokens were cool down his spine, but those weird, just super dark black lines on his back, I'm like, I don't get it, but okay.
Yeah, okay. Let's just go with the idea of it. Anyway, all right, so let's skip to the movie. First, we need to talk about Shailene Woodley, okay? Because you and I talked about this a little bit, but I went a little deeper. Let's talk about her filmography, because holy shit. So, she did Secret Life of the American Teenager, which if you have not seen, don't watch it, but watch one episode.
Oh my god.
Episode, and your life will be changed forever.
Her acting was horrendous. It wasn't even acting.
It's worse than Pretty Little Liars.
Oh my god,
it's worse.
It's worse.
Okay, so she's on that show from 2008 to 2013.
Yeah.
That's a long run.
Hmm.
This show kept getting renewed. That's my point there. Okay? What was this on Freeform? Of course it's on fucking Freeform.
Yeah, I think so. I think it was.
It had to have been. This is a
This has
sounds like a
free form
Freeform
written all
original.
over it. Yeah.
Exactly. So then she's in a few movies right after that ended. The Spectacular Now, White Bird in a Blizzard, Fault in Our Stars, and then Divergent. So I read on IMDb that she was the only actress who was auditioned for Triss. She was exactly who they wanted, and they didn't consider anyone else.
That's interesting.
And then she texted Miles Teller and was like, hey, you should audition for this movie because they had worked together on Spectacular Now and she wanted to work with him again. So she was like, why don't you get in here? And then he got cast for Peter. Isn't that crazy?
It is.
What I'm trying to say is someone saw, maybe they didn't see Secret Life. Maybe they didn't see it.
I
Maybe
mean,
they only watched Spectacular Now and White Bird in a Blizzard
which
and Fault in
Spectacular
Our
Now was
Stars.
such a good movie. Fault in Our Stars was
It's
such a good
so
movie.
good.
But then again, I think we had talked about her love interest in Fault in Our Stars is her brother in Divergent. So they're just
Hmm.
all like
Hmm.
it's like a
And then
little
Miles
universe.
Teller, obviously Spectacular Now. White Bird in a Blizzard, I saw.
I don't think I've ever
It's
seen
kind of
that.
more of an indie film.
Yeah.
I don't remember anyone else being in that, but it was definitely like a dark, like culty movie. So yeah, I'm just baffled that someone watched Secret Life of the American Teenager and they were like, we need her for this blockbuster movie.
I
Get
agree.
her in here
And
immediately.
it was funny when we were watching Divergent and the actor who's I don't know why I'm blanking right now. Oh, Ansel Elgort, the guy who
Hmm.
plays Caleb. Eric was just like, "Isn't he canceled?" I was like, "Yeah, I think so."
This was way before
It
cancel
was funny because
culture.
we were talking about how we love the movie Baby Driver, which was really really good, and it had
Hmm.
Ansel Elgort in it, who's obviously now canceled, and
Hmm.
Kevin Spacey, who's also canceled. And Eric
Oh,
was like, "But it was such a good movie." And I'm like, "I know." I was like, "Well, Lily James is in it, and Lily James is still, I think, not canceled." Although I
yeah.
think something did happen with her a few years ago. Not enough to get her canceled, but
It's one of those
she
things where you have to separate.
yeah, like she had like an affair, like she cheated on her boyfriend or something.
Okay,
It was more like a
okay.
scandal, not like a canceled scandal, just like
Gotcha, gotcha.
typical
Okay.
Hollywood shit.
Yeah. Yeah. I just can't believe the cast that's in this and the fact of how many big names they got alongside Shailene Woodley. I'm not going to stop saying it. But all of these other big names, Kate Winslet,
I know.
Mekhi Phifer, like,
And Ashley Judd,
and
who had like a very minimal scenes in this movie, and then I recognized the dad.
yes.
The dad was the president on Scandal, and I just was
Uh-huh.
like,
Hmm.
they just really they got everyone. But then it was weird because Theo James was an unknown. I don't think he was. This is the movie that like broke him out, didn't
Yeah.
it? So
And there were four other people considered for
yeah.
four. Ha,
Ooh.
no pun intended. But he wasn't their first pick. And excuse me for being thirsty for a moment, but Theo James, Miles Teller, and Mekhi Phifer,
I know.
are you kidding me?
Hmm.
Or even if I didn't want to watch this movie, I'm watching this movie.
No.
And even though I'm like, this relationship is so problematic, in the movie, it escalates. Now that I'm thinking about it, it escalates just as quickly as it does in the book, but
Hmm.
it's just like much harsher when you're watching it in a
Yeah.
movie. So the part where it's like their first night in Dauntless and they're at dinner and he's like, what makes you think you can talk to me? And I was like, what?
When that happened, I was like, "Oh, like that kind of like took me aback for a moment."
It's like it happens in the book, but not that
Not
aggressively.
that
Like
aggressive at
he's just
all.
like,
He's
why are you
he's
asking so
more
many
like he's more like you
questions?
need to watch yourself. Like he's more
Yeah.
like you need to stop. You know, you're being too curious. And but we're in the movie. He's just like, "What makes you think you can talk to me?" And it's like, "Oh, like is there some
And then,
rule that you can't talk to each
yeah,
other?"
was that rule established? Because I didn't see where it was.
Hmm.
And then all of a sudden, she looks at his tattoo, and then he turns around, and they start making out, and she's like, "Slow down, I don't want to go too fast." I'm like, "It's your first kiss. What was he doing? What was the suggestion? Just because you took his shirt off to see his tattoo?"
I know.
It escalated way too quickly for me. And then the I love you with the gun thing. I'm like, you don't love each other. Stop that. Stop that right now.
Yeah.
from this movie, you do not love each other.
No.
You may be starting a relationship, but you watch your mouth. And he's 18 years old. He's not 16. Not that it makes that much of a difference, but
No.
come on.
No.
There's also some other things they left out, like the rivalry between Tris and Christina, which I had forgotten about when I
Yeah.
reread the book,
Me
that
too.
she really has this like pity for Tris.
Mm-hmm.
And even though they're really good friends, Christina always thinks that she's better than Tris no
Mm-hmm.
matter what, and kind of like has like a pity friendship almost. And I did not like that.
And also, it was just kind of how in the book they don't really. It's not brought up in the movie at all. Like when they play the like the capture the flag kind of situation, and like Christina like says to Tris like, "Come on, like you've got us here. Like just let me get it." And it's almost like, why? Like why do you have to be the
Yeah.
person that? It's just it is. It's like this weird like complex between the two of them that
And she always like kind of talks down to her a
because
little
I think
bit.
that she thinks because she's from abnegation that she's kind of a lower status than her, and so the
hmm
fact that and she started out as lower status realistically when you look at how she began in Dauntless, and now all of a sudden
hmm
she's climbing the ranks, and I think Christina obviously feels threatened by that because how
And
can
then there's like,
someone from abnegation be better than her as a
hmm
candor, and like she's everything about her is more or less she thinks she's better than her.
and she's also in the book, she's bigger in stature, she's
Yes.
stronger,
Hmm.
but also it's not even that she looks down on her. Like she looks down on her for being abnegation and thinks kind of like, well, you're never gonna make it anyway.
Yeah.
And then they start planting these seeds of doubt. Like Peter starts saying, like, oh, Triss is doing so well in the mental simulations. Is she going to tell her friends her secret? And they're like, wait a second, what's the secret? Like, what are you keeping
Hmm.
from us? So there
Yeah.
is this internal competition. And when Christina realizes that her and Triss are on even playing fields, she kind of starts to panic a little bit.
Yep.
And then in the movie, Janine is different too. She's much less hostile in the movie at first. I feel like in the book, they already hated Janine from the beginning, but
Yeah.
then in the movie, when she goes to visit Caleb and those guards try and grab her, Janine's like, "Are you okay?
Yeah.
What is happening here?" And I'm like, "Kate Winslet, what are you doing?" Um, Other than that, though, I think they follow it as closely as they can. Was there anything that stood out to you about the movie?
Well, I already talked about the I love you scene.
Mm-hmm.
And then I also felt like the scene where she goes to see Caleb, it's actually a huge deal that she did that in the book. And it's just kind of not a big deal in the movie. Because when
Yes,
she
because
comes
she gets in
back and
trouble.
Eric is like, what were you thinking and everything, and then, it's just kind of like this because and then she says she had to get away, and then four is like, oh, because she tried to kiss me, and so she was embarrassed and
Mm-hmm.
she ran away. So it's like which again, like I know every time we talk about this, when you make a book into a movie, you obviously can't do every single thing.
Yeah.
So
But I think that that conversation between Caleb and Triss at Erudite was very important. And I feel like it was important to the plot. So I think they could have included more of it in the
yeah,
movie
and they also
because, like, the
they
serum that
yeah.
she tells him to look into, and he's like, I think that something's going on. So, like, in the book, Caleb already has that seed of doubt planted, but in the movie, he's like, I'm erudite till I die. Like, you gotta
I
leave,
know.
Triss.
And I also didn't. I thought they did a bad job of portraying Peter in the movie. I feel like in the book
Mm-hmm.
he had more depth, and they just totally cut out him going after Edward in general.
Yeah.
And they just kind of that just didn't happen. And also looking at I mean, this is just something stupid, and I know it's not a big deal, but it kind of mattered to me. It bothered me in the book. The Dauntless born initiates and the ones that transferred aren't ranked together, but in the movie they are. Remember the scoreboard?
Right.
You know what
Right.
I mean? I'm just kind of like, that's kind of like weird. Like, I don't know. It was just, I don't know. And also, I think that the ziplining part was different in the book than it
Mm-hmm.
was in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Just little things. I'm just being nitpicky. I know. But
Yeah. And they had to cut out some relationships. Like, I really liked her relationship in the book with Uriah,
yeah, me
that
too.
he really respected her. Like, he was the first person besides Four who really respected her abilities and gave her
Mm-hmm.
confidence because her friends were kind of tearing her
Yeah.
down. So I'm not surprised they didn't include that in the movie, but I did really like it in the book.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think that we talked about it a little bit, but the love story is just so much more forced so quickly in the movie. And
Mm-hmm.
like, this is a 2.5 hour movie. So you could have given me a little more buildup. You could have given me a little more Theo James being
I
a
know.
sweet angel.
And I was like, when I first watched this movie, I remember I like loved it.
Yeah.
And then I watched it this past weekend and I was like, oh no.
It's like, this is not
This
great.
is terrible. This is not a good movie.
But now I'm so excited to watch the next one because I remember them developing Peter's character a
Yes.
lot more and we
Mm-hmm.
see a lot more of his ruthlessness. So I hope that I'm remembering that correctly. I hope that we're remembering that Four and Triss's relationship gets better. But what I will say is I really like the ending in the movie where they actually inject Janine with the
Yeah,
serum.
that was a nice.
That was cool.
That didn't happen obviously in the book, so I thought
Right.
that was a nice little
Like to use her
mm-hmm.
power against her. And
Yeah.
there's that whole like, don't get me wrong, there's a certain beauty in your resistance,
Yeah.
which Janine had said to Triss, and then Triss says to her. So I actually really like that. I thought that was
Yeah.
a cool thing.
Mm-hmm. Okay, this I didn't like this either. So in the book, Al and Triss's friendship is definitely written out more. And so when he does end up, because obviously in the book he ends up having a crush on Triss, and then that's one of the scenes too where she's like, I don't like affection, she doesn't get affection and everything, and she's not interested in him that way. And then when he does the whole thing of almost throwing her over into the chasm, and then he commits suicide, more or less because Triss like won't forgive him. But it felt so rushed in the movie, that entire, from him being involved in throwing her off to like her seeing him in like the cafeteria and he's like, can you forgive me? And it's like, that was very, very rushed. I didn't like that at all. Because then he did, and he like kills himself, and it's like, it's just like, okay, but there was not enough
You
done
didn't
in the movie.
see enough why she blamed herself. I feel like you either need to include it fully or not include it at all. Because it wouldn't have taken away from the movie if they didn't include it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of like unnecessary to put it in there if you're not going to fully put it. And then obviously I missed the dialogue in Triss's head where we see that she's struggling to free herself from her abnegation roots. But obviously that's hard to convey in a movie. I get that. That was one of my favorite parts of the book, is that struggle that she's having. So anything else about the movie, or shall we move to the ratings?
Let's move to the rating.
All right, so obviously our rating is based on the book, but I can't say it's not influenced by the movie, if you know what I mean. So our rating scale today is going to be broken limbs from jumping out of a moving train.
Oh my gosh. That's hilarious.
Because no one seems to break any limbs, except when that person dies at the beginning.
I know. That was so random. I mean,
it was literally like a dauntless born.
I understand it, but it was like, and again, that just was, I understand why it wasn't just in the movie, because it was, you know.
It was like it was a nothing, but it was like, holy shit, at the same time.
Yeah.
Anyways, so how many broken limbs are you giving this book?
I feel like this happens every time we do a podcast. I go into it with my rating, and then I change it mid-episode.
Samesies.
So I rated it 5 the other day, but now that we're talking about it, I'm like, no, it's a 4. It's 4 broken limbs. It's 4 for me.
I'm surprised that you rated this 5.
I don't know why.
It's a 4 for me. Shut up.
It's, I don't know, because even like when I finished it and I was on Goodreads, I was like, oh, I'll give it 5, and then I was like, now we're talking about it, because you know what it is. Once I got to the ending, and I like the ending of the book. If I really like the ending, I think that I just forget everything else that I've read.
Right. Well, but that's what we talk about. Sometimes it is just about that feeling that it gives you. So if you leave off with a feeling that you enjoyed it, and then we start breaking it down piece by piece, of course it's going to change that a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. Because it's, now that we're talking about the characters and realistically the potholes and the things that don't make sense, you're like, oh, okay. Because I just know that once I got to the point where the serum, when they did the tracking serum into everybody, once she wakes up in that bunker and she realizes what's happening from that point on until the end of the book, it's just like you're kind of like captivated. And so I'm basing it off that captivation that book had me in, that chokehold that it had me in the very end of the book.
I agree with that. I think the first time I read this book, I easily gave it 5 stars. But after the reread, This is funny because I was ready to give it 4 broken limbs. I'm going down to 3.5. I've
That's
gotta.
fine.
Because I love the concept of this book. Like you said, that ending is great.
Mm-hmm.
And the build up to it, they do introduce it well, and then it just like happens like quickly, which it has to. And I like the concept of that. And it's definitely a series that I will always enjoy rereading and watching, even if it's just for that nostalgia factor. But I can't get past how differently I felt about the love story portion and just like you said, some of the plot holes. I was like, I'm giving it a pass because this is the first part of the series and I know that they do get better.
Mm-hmm.
So my rating is only going to go up as we continue, but right now you lost me. Although if we're going off of how many times I got to see Theo James in the movie, that's all the broken limbs. Anyway,
Which is, and I told you before, I named my dog after Theo James. I was like obsessed when I got my dog, when I adopted my dog, I was in love with Theo. That was my like current celebrity crush, so I named my
mhm.
dog Theo.
I mean, it's understandable. He's brooding, he's moody, he's hot as fuck.
Mm-hmm.
What's not to love, you
And
know?
and then it's actually funny watching him in Divergent after like seeing him. Wait, did you watch White Lotus?
No.
All right, because he's in season 2 of White Lotus,
Mm-hmm.
and his character is a phenomenal in that. It's a terrible character, but still, you love him. Like you can't help but like,
Uh-huh.
and I just love Theo James. So it's like really funny seeing him in Divergent after just watching him in White Lotus earlier this year. And it's like,
Wow, I really need to watch White Lotus.
yeah,
Okay, that's moving it even higher
hmm
on my list of things
yeah.
to watch. All right, so anything else that you want to add?
I don't think so.
I think we thoroughly destroyed this, what I thought was a classic
No.
YA
Can I just
dystopian
like it
old
wasn't
school
even
novel.
the book was fine. Like the book I had no qualms with the book. The book was great. It was the movie that I seriously struggled with because
Maybe we should
I
have watched the
was
movie.
like this was I remember loving it so much. I think it was so great and then I'm watching it and I'm like, "Oh no, this is bad. This is
Mm-hmm.
not good. This just is
This is
not
a
a good
big
book."
budget bad movie.
Yeah. Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah. But I agree. I'm being too harsh on the book. I enjoyed reading it.
Yeah.
So it's like I can't be mad
And you
about
gotta
it.
like realize too, like now we're older reading a book that
Mm-hmm.
was, when it came out, it was the first of its kind, and we have nothing to compare it to, and you obviously we really enjoyed it reading it for the first
Mm-hmm.
time. So, and we were younger, it's what 10 years now since we've read it, so it's like,
Mm-hmm.
and obviously we've discussed how different we feel reading books that we read 10 years ago. So it's just,
Absolutely. Yeah.
you're like, oh, okay, maybe I liked it when I was younger, but now you're kind of like, no. But I don't,
Yeah.
it's also a YA novel, so I can understand why there's also a lot of stuff missing.
Let's just say it didn't age as well for us as Hunger Games did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, agreed.
All right, well, that's all we have for you today. If you like what you heard, please make sure to follow, subscribe, and rate and review the podcast on whatever platform you're listening on. If you have any book recommendations or questions for us, you can email us at fullybookedcalfpod@gmail.com. If you want to yell at us for any of the opinions that we've expressed in this episode, please email us. Also, be sure to follow us on TikTok and Instagram at fullybookedcalfpod to see our upcoming reads. Thanks for checking us out, and remember,
If you need us, we're fully booked.
bye.
Bye.